I find myself agreeing with the Senator from Wyoming. It seems to me there are two separate conversations, two separate issues at stake. One is funding, and then what to do with the funding. Those are the two issues. And the problem, as I see it, is right now we have a proposal for no funding, and yet we're talking about the importance of land conservation. I'm reminded of the old poem, "Mother, may I go out to swim? Yes, my darling daughter, hang your clothes on a hickory limb, but don't go near the water." Having this structure of, we just reauthorize permanently the Land and Water Conservation Fund, but we don't fund it, it doesn't mean anything. And so I guess the question before us is, we ought to fund it to the authorized level. This is, I disagree with the senator from Utah, this is money that comes, and you characterize it, comes from the land. And it was designed in 1965 to go back to the land. I mean, that's exactly what this purpose was. And to the extent that we're siphoning off these funds for other entirely different purposes, that's really not appropriate. And then the question is allocation. Mr. Lebowski, in your testimony, I do want to clarify one issue. You mentioned that there might be demands on the fund from other purposes like the Restore Our Parks Act. The Restore Our Parks Act explicitly does not go into the Land and Water Conservation Fund. It's right, it's in the language of the bill. The Restore Our Parks Act is funded by excess revenues that would otherwise go into the Treasury. So I just want to clarify that it's not a violation of the Land and Water Conservation Act funding. Mr. O'Mara, am I correct about the fundamental structure that this is from the land to the land?
Yeah. And the idea was very simple when Secretary Udall and President Kennedy proposed it, which was, if we're going to take a public asset and basically liquidate it and turn it into value, a lot of which is private, some of the revenues from that should be put back into the land to make sure that we're mitigating the impact we've had.
But over the years, it's been siphoned off, it's been not allocated at all. I think there are only 2 years it's been funded to its maximum in the last 20, is that true?
Yeah, so in 1978, it was increased to $900 million. Only 2 years, 1998 and 2001, has it been allocated fully. $22 billion that should have gone towards the Land and Water Conservation Fund have been used for other purposes, just siphoned off and raided into the other Treasury Park programs.
And if we talk about using it for maintenance, that's not what it was originally intended for. Is that correct?
Correct. I mean, the idea was that this was going to create recreational opportunities and access opportunities across the country. And this is why I think the legislation you're leading with others is very complementary, but it's a separate piece of legislation that should be supported on its own right as opposed to being merged into this bill.
Mr. Yablonsky, convince me that this money should be used for maintenance when that wasn't its original purpose.
Well, actually, so the original purpose of the statute was to facilitate outdoor recreation. And I would say it'd be really compelling to figure out what our public land managers believe would facilitate outdoor recreation the best. I think in many cases, access, roads, campgrounds, trail maintenance is better linked to recreation than potentially acquisition. So that's why I would think that, again, going back to the original purpose of the act, if we really want to facilitate recreation, what might our public land managers believe would really facilitate public outdoor recreation? And again, campgrounds, trails. There's a trail in Bozeman, Montana, Sacagawea Peak, that I take my family to hike to, and there's a road up there to the Ferry Lake Trailhead. It is more dangerous for me to drive that road to the Ferry Lake Trailhead than to haul myself 2,000 feet up to tag the top of that peak. So I would, as a recreationist, I would say in that particular case, maintenance would be more important.
Madam Chair, is the allocation of these funds within the jurisdiction of this committee in authorizing legislation, or is it strictly appropriations?
We included in our legislation last year a calibration, if you will, of state side to federal side. So yes, we did that.
As I recall, it was
40 and 40, and then there was the specific set aside as well for additional uses.
And then the question is whether the Appropriations Committee pours the money into the fund that will then go into those.
But we dealt with a clarification as to the stateside piece, because what had happened, as I mentioned in my opening, was we were seeing greater acquisition, greater dollars being sent to the federal side as opposed to the state side.
And our bill, as I recall, changed that, fixed that.
Correct.
So it'd be
Correct.
state
So
and
that is
federal.
within this committee's jurisdiction.
Good, thank you. Thank you all, and thank you for your testimony today. I think this is an important subject. Madam Chair, thank you for calling this hearing.